I've been doing this work for well over a decade, and I can tell you, no one ever thinks it'll happen to them. The truth is, disasters are on the rise. Floods, tornadoes, famines, wildfires, and hurricanes. A 6,700% increase globally since 1900. According to the United Nations, the number of disasters has nearly doubled in the last 20 years compared to the previous 2 decades. Look around, crises are everywhere. But I've stood in many places where families lost everything in a single night. I've prayed with hurting moms and dads and kids standing in shock, wondering what comes next for their lives. But time after time, I've seen the miracle happen. Not because someone preached a sermon, no, but because the church showed up, because believers surrounded a hurting family with love and practical help. That's when something shifts. They realize they're not alone. They realize that they are seen and deeply loved. I've watched countless people find Jesus, not only through words, but through the presence of His people, through compassion. It's through compassion of the church stepping in and walking with Him when no one else would. That's what United in Crisis is all about. We don't replace the church, we activate it. Remember the story that Jesus told in Luke? A man is left beaten and bleeding on the side of the road. And then the religious leaders walk by. They see him, but they didn't stop. Then a Samaritan comes. He doesn't just feel sorry. He doesn't just offer sympathy. No, he has compassion. Compassion in the biblical sense that just isn't a feeling, but it's an act of concern. He steps into the man's pain. He alleviates his suffering. That's what we're called to do. That's our job. You see, in the decades past, the church was at the very center of disaster and crisis response in our communities, working together and revealing the goodness of God to all those in need. In the wake of wars and famines and economic collapses, it was the believers who led the charge to feed and clothe and care for the vulnerable and the destitute till they were back on their feet. Hospitals and orphanages and relief agencies, most of them were founded by the church, not as a side mission, but as the mission. We have to stop walking by our neighbors. We have to carry people who can't carry themselves until they're back on their feet again. So here's how it works. Every city that launches a crisis response church network, what we call a CRCN, is divided into geographic areas by zip code. We call these sectors. Each sector has a volunteer sector leader who helps churches, nonprofits, and businesses in the area join the network and get connected. Every church that joins the network appoints a church coordinator, a trusted volunteer who acts as the bridge between the church and the network. Their job is to keep the church leadership informed, build a core team of volunteers, and lead the way when it's time to respond. Those volunteers, they'll be trained, equipped, and badged by United in Crisis to meet the emotional, spiritual, and physical needs of people impacted by crisis. They're not just responders, they're ready to help people through the hardest days of their lives. When a church, nonprofit, or business joins the network, they fill out a simple form that tells us what they can offer. Warehouse space, shelter capacity, food, clothing, it all matters when people are in need, and we make sure nothing gets left on the table. The goal, it's simple, but it's everything. To walk with every person impacted by crisis until they're back on their feet. Every survivor who asks for help is matched with a trained volunteer, someone we call a shepherd. Their job isn't just to provide resources, it's to walk alongside that person with compassion, prayer, and presence until their case is closed and their hope is restored. When crisis hits, the local CRCN springs into action. So first thing, funds are raised to support the response. And then the volunteers are deployed and coordinated. A survivor hotline is launched to connect people in need with trained shepherds. And then the network rallies around each survivor, making sure every need is met until the very end. And it's in that journey, in those one-on-one moments between a shepherd and a survivor, that something incredible happens. Transformation. Crises are becoming too big for one church, one ministry or local government to handle alone. But when the churches unite under one network, when they share resources and they coordinate response and move in compassion, everything changes. A crisis response church network is bigger than just disaster relief. It's Matthew 25, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, welcoming the stranger. This is the church with oil in its lamp, ready when the moment comes, and not just ready, but united. Because when we move as one body, healing begins to flow, not just to the city, but to the church itself. I've stood with so many people in these moments of heartbreak. What I've seen again and again is this: the day of their greatest loss becomes the day of their greatest breakthrough. We've seen what happens when churches become the Good Samaritan of their community. They become a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. Lives are saved, hope is restored, and the gospel becomes visible in the most powerful way. And then once again, the church becomes relevant in the eyes of the community. We must remember Jesus, the Good Shepherd, laid down his life for us as a people who are in crisis. So we, the body of Christ, we must do the same. We have to lay down our lives for our neighbors in crisis as the Good Samaritan. We must be united for our community and reveal the goodness of God as Christ revealed his Father's goodness to us, helping people get back on their feet as he did with us. It's time to pay it forward together. If this is your dream and you feel the conviction of God right now stirring your heart, let's have a conversation. We would be honored to hear what God is saying and share how we can help you. Visit unitedincrisis.org.